Hi, my name is Marcy Lundy, host of the Beauty's Aging Gracefully podcast. And I'm really excited about the guest that we actually have for our season premiere. This is a wonderful treat. I would love to welcome guest Niamh McAnally. McAnally.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Beauty's Aging Gracefully. First of all, your story is just incredible. I won't spill the beans. So if you could tell the Beauty's Aging Gracefully podcast a little bit about yourself.
For sure. And thank you, Marcy, for having me on. There's no better titled podcast than Beauty's Aging Graceful. I feel wonderful today just because of your
Yes.
title. Um, So yes, my name is Niamh and I'm from Ireland, and I grew up in Ireland within a theatrical family. So both my parents were actors, and they were both freelance actors. So I was raised with this kind of concept that change is inevitable, we're always evolving, and that you can reinvent yourself over and over again, which is something that has actually helped me as I've gone through the various different stages of life.
Sure. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know your father was in the industry. Was your mother in the industry as well?
Yes, she was a more stage actress, but she's got a couple of movies. She was in Angela's Ashes, which is probably one of the movies that would have been known over here in America. And my dad was in The Mission, My Left Foot, and various other movies.
Oh, wow. So you were a Hollywood kid.
Well, yeah, Hollywood kid, but not in Hollywood. I
Oh,
was
yeah,
like I said, it was all through in Ireland.
very
And my
good.
dad did travel overseas for in later life, doing more movies overseas. But and I
Okay.
I was very blessed because I had also trained as a television director. And at one point I was between jobs, and my dad was cast in the movie The Mission with Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons, and that was filmed down in South America in Colombia. And, excuse me, and also
Hmm.
in the waterfalls by Iguazu in Argentina. And
Okay.
I ended up accompanying him on that. And that's when the producers realized I had a skill set in canoeing and rock climbing and all that kind of stuff. So I ended up on the stunt team as the stunt assistant. So that was
Oh,
pretty impressive. Yeah, it
that
was
is
great.
very impressive. Any bumps and bruises, battle scars from doing that?
No, actually not from that at all. No, it was run by the stunt team was run by Vic Armstrong, who was
Okay.
the stunt double for Harrison Ford for all of the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies.
Oh,
So it was
wow.
very well, the safety issues were absolutely spot on. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Uh, First, I want to say that I love that you are just a force. As the podcast is named Beauty's Aging Gracefully, I think it's so important that women realize at all ages, but particularly as we get older, nothing is going to stop us. We
Mhm.
just have to believe in ourselves and go for it. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your path as you got a little older, and where you landed and what got you going to become the force that you are.
Wow, that's a great question. One of the big influences for me growing up in Ireland is a small enough country.
Mhm.
And when I was 12, my parents took me to Spain on our first overseas holidays. And it was
Okay.
in the middle of winter. And for anybody who's been in Ireland or lived in Ireland, it's a beautiful country, especially when the sun is shining. But in
Mm.
the middle of winter, it can be quite dark because it's like at 52 to 54 degrees latitude. So it's quite far north, and it gets dark very early in the evenings, and in the winters it can be low grade clouds, and so that was kind of my experience of the winters in Ireland. And
Okay.
when I got to this vacation in Spain, it was like February. I was like, are you kidding me? The
Mm.
sun is shining in other countries in the middle of the winter. As soon as I am old enough, I'm going to go follow the sun, which is
Sure.
funnily enough why my memoir was ended up called Following Sunshine.
Yes.
But that started my whole concept of traveling. And I left school at 17, and then I went to Paris to study French language and literature there. And I was living as a jeune fille au pair in one of the families. And
Mm.
that definitely gave me this concept that I want to travel as a traveler, not as a tourist. I want to be able to embrace the local culture. I want to live in the local communities. And I think
Sure.
you get a much better understanding. And so that sparked my whole concept behind volunteer travel. Now, over the years, I think I'm on my fifth career at this point. So I've actually in five different industries, believe it or not, between television and theater. And then also I was a scuba diver instructor for a while. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, and anyway, now I've finally settled. I'm a full-time writer, but
Hmm.
one of my projects early on was a coral reef conservation project in Belize, where we
Okay.
were mapping out the underwater topography in order to help them set up a marine sanctuary in Belize because it's got the second largest barrier reef system in the world after Australia. So
Hmm.
that was way back in the 90s. We were doing that. And over a period of years, like I said, I started living in different places. And one time I was living for 5 years on a tiny island called Sark. That's in the
Okay.
UK Channel Islands, just off the coast of France.
Okay.
And I was there for, well, I thought I was only going to go for a year, but I loved it so much. Such an idyllic little island. But
Wow.
at the end of 5 years, the property that I was managing was, they had boutique hotels, little luxury boutique hotels. The property I
Mhm.
was managing, the owners closed it. And so suddenly I had been living in staff accommodation and there was an island with no car. So it was kind of like, okay, now what? I was in my 50s at that point. And I
Mhm.
said, now's the time to take time out. And I had found this website that enabled you to connect with host families in different locations around the world. So I thought
Okay.
I'll take off and I'll travel. I really wanted to circumnavigate, like go in one direction, go from point A all the way back to point A again. So I
Right.
started off that in 2015 and went all through the South Pacific Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, French Polynesia, and then up to Palau and across Asia and back to the London area. And
My
I was
goodness.
about to settle down after a year of doing that. And I found one final project, which was to crew for a solo sailor to help him take his boat from Florida to the Bahamas. And it was only supposed to last 1 month.
Wow.
Well, let me tell you, when you live 24/7 on a sailboat and you have to rely on your fellow mariner for your safety, for
Mm.
entertainment, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell service, there's no internet, you
Oh.
end up talking, right? And you and we I was funny because neither of us were looking for a relationship at all. And
Wow.
it turned out over the months that we were on the boat, we just
Mhm.
had this incredible bond and friendship developed. And then that turned into romance. And then at the end of, I think it was 4 months, we brought the boat back to Florida and he went back to California. And I was
Mhm.
heading to Ireland for a visit with my family. And we thought that was it,
Oh.
even though there was something there, but we just said
Yeah.
he was more so, he said, I've been out in a long-term marriage. I've, had a long-term career. I just kind of want to take things and age beautifully. Let's put it that way, do something fun for myself with no
Yeah.
commitments to anything.
Sure.
And I was like, absolutely, no problem. But you know what it was? There was something about him I knew that had a profound effect on who I became.
Mm.
And just from those deep conversations we used to have on the boat. And sure enough, after 3 weeks, he calls me up and he said, do you want to sail up the east coast of America with me? And I went, sure, because I had time. And he said, and then we could jump off from New Jersey. And he agreed to come to Ireland with me to have a little visit around Ireland. And then I
Oh.
came back and visited his family in California. And then we lived on the boat after that for another 6 years, sailing up and down the Caribbean islands.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I want to tell you, it was like about 4 months, or sorry, 4 years later
Mhm.
after I'd first stepped on the boat, um, he got over his allergy to relationships and he proposed.
Oh, how
I
beautiful.
know. It was
Oh my
absolutely
gosh.
amazing. Yes.
Well, first, that's so beautiful because having no Wi-Fi is great, So
Mm.
if you got under one another's skin, you were going to know that very early on.
Yes, let me tell you, there was plenty of stories.
But that is so beautiful. One, you're doing something you're enjoying. And then two, you meet your future mate while doing it. That is so beautiful.
Mhm.
Now, you mentioned your book, Following Sunshine, and it acts as a roadmap for the rest of us women. It inspires us to awaken the potential that lies within us and a path that is just our truest being. And I know a lot of women, you said you were 50 when you first started to embark on this journey. So many women, they may feel a fire within and want to do something, but they are discouraged because of age. Did you find yourself facing that little voice in your head discouraging you at any point?
It's interesting. One of the things that was driving me was since I was a little girl, I always wanted to work at sea.
Okay.
And during a time when I was between jobs, this was back in, when was it? It would have been back at the end of 2009, 2010.
Okay.
I trained to become, crew for one of the mega yachts. So,
Oh,
you have to go through various different fire safety drills and all the hospitality. And I had a hospitality background having worked with hotels.
okay.
But anyway, so I go to the boat show down in Fort Lauderdale in Florida, which is where the captains kind of choose their crew and you go and do meet and greets. And I was
Sure.
at this one event, all the captains were, interviewing people, etc. And at the end of the night, I wasn't getting hired.
Mm,
And there was a lot of girls a lot younger than me, like in their 20s, maybe or 30s, that were getting hired
yeah.
with a lot less experience than I had, but both on the water and also, in the hospitality industry. And
Right.
eventually, at the end of the evening, this one guy comes up to me and he goes, "You know why you're not getting hired?" And I went, "No." And he goes, "Number one, you're over 20. Number two, you're over 20. And number
Oh.
three," I said, "Don't tell me I'm over 20." And he goes, "Now you're catching on, right?"
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was a very interesting thing that I learned from that is that, we all talk about ageism and at various stages in our lives, but we
Mm,
all age out of certain jobs, let's say. I mean, just looking
yeah,
at the recent Olympics, like gymnasts are retired out by mid to late 20s. Do you know what I mean?
very
So
true.
so aging out happens throughout our life for various different things.
Right.
But I think part of what helps us is to embrace the stage we're at and, just accept either if it's a physical limitation,
Yeah.
or even a mental sort of attention, if you like, attention span. For instance, when I was directing television, my brain was very quick, very fast, cutting
Mhm.
live television, magazine shows and stuff like that, and a game show.
Yeah.
I know now that I couldn't compete and be as fast as somebody younger than me in that environment. I just know I've
Right.
I've I've aged out of that.
Yeah.
So I think part of this aging process that we have to look at is what are we passionate about? What's our skill set? And what do we actually want to do? And
Yes.
and the beauty of it now is you can choose, the older you get, I think the more discerning you become in
Mm,
terms of, well, I've probably got less time ahead of me than I have behind me. So I'm
right.
really going to focus in on what it is I want to do and where I feel I can make the best contribution, let's say.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was reinventing that concept of wanting to go and work at sea. Clearly, I wasn't able to work on the mega yachts, but
Okay.
I ended up working at sea on a small sailboat, 40-foot sailboat, liveaboard. So,
Yeah.
and it didn't come the way I expected it, but I still had
Mm.
that intention out there of something I wanted to do, and I now I've done it. Um, and that's a chapter that's finished in my life. I'm not going to work at sea anymore because thank you very much. I quite like being on land now without the weather issues and all. I mean, it was absolutely idyllic, but it's hard work and also there's you've got a lot to deal with the weather.
Oh yeah.
Um, so reinventing yourself like that all the time, I think helps you not stay stuck in what your age is. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
I
Like for
do.
instance, right now, I'm a guest speaker on Celebrity Cruises along with my husband.
Oh,
We're back on
nice.
the water. We're both
Yeah.
on stage. We're both giving talks. And at the same time, the beauty of it is there's somebody else who has to worry about the weather. There's somebody else working the galley. I'm not a galley slave anymore. There's somebody else doing housekeeping. It's
Very
absolutely,
good.
you know,
Yeah.
so so I think that for me is the thing to accept where you're at,
Yeah.
age-wise, and look at what what would you be the youngest at within that age parameter you're in, if that makes sense?
Exactly. No, absolutely. Now, growing up in the industry that is finally changing, where they realize women actually have more to offer as they get older, do you feel like that sort of planted a seed with you where you had an awareness that people were looking at the youth in regards to women, but you still knew what you wanted to do and went forward with that?
Yes, and it is true that women used to be typecast. If you're talking about within the television and the movie industry, yes,
Yes.
certainly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest the best person who I think broke the glass ceiling on that was Reese Witherspoon when she
Mm.
started her company specifically trying to get like lead roles for females because if they weren't in the Juve role at 20, 21 and the romance story or whatever it was,
Yeah.
they were always playing supporting roles. And she took it on to really create new roles for people, who were in their 40s and 50s. And it
Right.
wasn't that they were, you had to wait. I think before that in the entertainment industry, there was a gap for women. They could get leading roles as a young age, and then they
Mhm.
could get leading roles again when they were the grandmother, let's say.
That's
But there
true.
was
Yeah.
nothing in the middle, and I think she did an awful lot to actually bridge that gap, which was
Yeah.
fantastic.
That's very true. Yeah, she's someone that I admire. She's done a wonderful job with that.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
nice to see, like when you're in the middle age zone, so to speak. Oh, okay, I can see someone that is also my age, not not just 20 or 70.
Yeah, and they also did a great thing with diversity as well. Do you know what I mean? Like one of the I don't know if you've seen the show Bridgerton.
Yes, yes,
Oh yeah, I mean that is fantastic the way they
it
set that, how
is.
they cast that, and it's much more diverse as well. I think that was wonderful.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's so nice that the industry finally caught up with real life.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly, exactly.
Having such an expansive personal history of adventure, I was wondering if you could share how your experiences open uh, a person up for reflection and personal development.
Good one. And I think to me, a lot comes down from traveling, from
Mm.
experiencing different cultures and different creeds and different ways of looking at life.
Sure.
One of the places I was in during that year when I was volunteering was down in Vanuatu. And I went to Vanuatu, which is a chain of islands in the South Pacific. I went there to work on sorry, not a coral reef, the a turtle conservation program. And I was there for when they were hatching. It was amazing just to see the little turtles hatching out and
Oh
doing the
my
work with council.
goodness.
Oh, it was quite extraordinary. A little
Yeah.
island called Mozo off the main island of Efate in
Okay.
Vanuatu. But part of that experience was there was eight of us all together, and I got adopted into a local family. And I had
Um,
Mama Cecilia was my mama. I had a new baby sister, Fabiana, and the whole family. It was just amazing.
I
And
bet.
one of the things that was fantastic about it was I learned that essentially across the universe, we're all actually the same and we're
Hmm.
all looking for the same things, but we maybe have a different path to it or a different way of experiencing it. So, for
Yeah.
instance, there was one day Mama Cecilia was making bread. Now, she was
Mhm.
outdoors, this wooden table. She was swapping pieces of flour onto the table, and I don't know how she didn't get a handful of splinters. And then she was showing me, okay, well, we'll put it on the fire here. Like there was no cooker, no stove top. There was no gas mark 6 or, put it to 350 degrees. No, she just put on some more hot coals and put a lid on top. And that was it. Yeah, about an hour's time, she had this most beautiful crusty bread.
Oh, wow.
And it reminded me of my own mother who used to make bread back in Ireland. And I used
Mm.
to sit up on the kitchen counter watching her make the bread. And when I was there in Vanuatu, I suddenly realized these two women have grown up very differently, certainly very different economic backgrounds, but essentially they're still the same. They're
Mm.
still the mother, they're still the heart of the family, they're still taking care of everything, they're still, playing that role. And she would go out and work as well. She would go across to the main island and she would sell the crops on market days. My mother was an actress, she would go out to work, but she also took care of the family. So I honestly think I think the bottom line is we're all looking for love and trying to love someone. I think
It's
that's
true.
part of our journey, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And that's such a great experience. Um, if you could touch a bit more on venturing out and having those experiences, I think of them also as like the movie Eat, Pray, Love. I just
Mm.
simply love that movie. And I think that if given the opportunity, every woman should go out and just sort of set herself free and learn, like you're saying, realize that so many different cultures, when it comes down to it, are doing the same thing. And that personal enrichment. So when you were in this experience, were you completely open, or are you just sort of, the longer you were in the experience, just opened up to what you were learning and seeing?
Well, when I set off on this particular, I had been traveling for like, 1 month at a time over the years, but this is the first
Mhm.
time I had actually taken an entire year, a bit like in that respect, eat, pray, love, as you mentioned.
Right.
Um, what I learned from that and what opened me up a little bit was that I had to listen to my intuition.
Mm.
A
Yes.
lot of people before I set off said to me things like, "You're a woman alone. You shouldn't be just traveling alone." And you could look, this could happen, that could happen, this could happen. And I had to say, stop, guys, stop. They were trying to infect me with their own fears.
Yeah.
And I had to say, look, I've so far I've traveled quite a bit already.
Right.
Um, I know how to take care of myself. Granted, something awful can happen, but if you go in with that mindset, I think mindset is super important
Yes.
and rely on your intuition. I know Oprah calls it that, like aha moment or if this the first you should act on the first something's off here and remove
Exactly.
yourself from it. And I actually had two experiences. One was in Vietnam and one was in Malaysia,
Mm.
and for two different projects. And it wasn't that I was fearful, but I realized the situation and the environment was not a good match for me, and I
Mm.
wasn't a good match for the situation. So I actually removed myself. And I think if anything travel has taught me, it's to listen really well to your gut feelings.
Yeah.
And because it never steers us wrong. I think where
Right.
we go astray is when we ignore it, you know.
Yes.
My
Yes.
my dad had one expression that was drilled into me as a kid, and I've never forgotten it. He said, "Once you know something, you can't not know it anymore."
Mm.
So, you know maybe this is not a great situation, or there's something off. Now
Right.
you can ignore it. It's not going to go away. And if it's
Yeah.
very important, it's going to start hammering you on the head until suddenly you pay attention,
So
right?
true. So true.
And so that has helped me a lot. Now, there's been different relationships I've been in where like, yeah, this is probably not a good space for me to be in, right? And
Yeah.
I've known it, but for some reason, I haven't given myself permission to extricate myself from the situation. I mean, that was
Yeah.
when I was younger. Now
Yeah.
I do it automatically. You know what I mean? I know that, okay, this is not good for me. I need to be out of this. And I think that
Absolutely.
travel has taught me that too.
Mm.
But interestingly, on that journey, one of the things that came up for me was delayed grief for my mother's death.
Oh, wow.
And it had been 14 years early, or sorry, 14 months earlier when she passed. And I
Okay.
happened to be overseas at the time. I was down in Kenya on a wild fitness course.
Yeah.
And I had to go into practicality mode, find a new airfare, try get home, get there for the funeral, go back, and then it was back to work. And then anyway, so this year later, I was actually, I was down in Tonga at the time,
Okay.
and idyllic beach. I mean, under normal circumstances, you'd have no reason to be sad. You're like living in paradise, on this gorgeous beach, tropical island, etc. And I was totally melancholic, and I didn't know what
Mhm.
was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And eventually, it came up that I suddenly started to cry, and I literally sat on the beach and cried for 6 hours. And the only reason I know it was 6 hours is because the tide was fully in when I started, and then it was completely out when I looked up and I went, oh, because I started to journal.
Wow.
Um, and that's what it was. I had processed my mother's death intellectually,
Mm.
but I had pushed down the emotions of it and the sadness and that level of grief. And there was another thing that was sometimes when we get busy with things like that and you've
Yeah,
got to move on with your life,
for
it's
sure. Yes.
those moments, especially when you travel by yourself.
Mhm.
There's that time alone where you really get to be with yourself, and
Right.
anything that I think that's unresolved is going to show up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I think it's so beautiful to be able to comfortably spend time with yourself,
Hmm.
especially as women, because we do a lot of, uh, especially in our younger years, conforming. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what we want to be, but the beauty of getting older, we are comfortable in our skin, and how nice to be able to just for 6 hours let yourself go and feel every bit of that.
Mm, mm. And now, once that process was done, I was in a much better space about it. Do you know what I mean?
I
Obviously,
do.
like everybody, you miss your parents after they're gone. You missed a loved one when they pass away.
Yeah.
It's a very tough time to lose somebody. It's awful.
Mhm.
But it is a journey, and there's no timeline on it. That's something I learned from that experience. There is no timeline.
Mm.
Some people seem to be doing fine. And you don't know what's going on the inside. Some people could take
Right.
a couple more years, Some people get really do process out in a couple of months, but everybody's different in that respect.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, just doing it
Hmm.
all in our own time. So I love that you and your husband, Captain Gary, live and work together. I know we talked a little bit about it earlier. For those of us that are, out looking, I always think it's best to not look. That's when you'll find your mates. But any information you could give on first, if you have found your mate, being able to comfortably spend 24/7 together, work hard and play hard. And was it easy for the two of you?
Well, I have to answer the first part. 100% have I met the person I was always supposed to meet my entire
Wow.
life. And I was what age was I? I was mid 50s when I met him, I think. It was
Wow.
about 8 years ago now. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's hope. That's one thing. There's hope for us all. There's absolutely
Yeah.
hope for us all.
Yeah.
Um, Working together, one thing we learned, he was born and raised in Los Angeles, and as you know, I was from Ireland. And one
Yeah.
thing we learned during that experience of living on the boat, literally in tight quarters, I mean, 40 feet space on the inside, is that just because we both speak English doesn't mean we both speak the same language.
Ooh.
And, and I'll give you an example of one of our big rows.
Mhm.
And it was relatively early on until now we've found a way to work through this. But here's what happened. We were at this anchorage and it was time to pull anchor and head off to the next port.
Mhm.
And Gary said we should stop in for fuel for the boat.
Mhm.
And I said to him, I said, "Are you sure we really need fuel?" And he says, "Well, we don't have to get some, but it's always good to top up," which is true.
Yeah.
But really, what I was noticing was it was getting very windy. And on the dock itself, there was another catamaran boat ahead of us. And there was a lot of boats to the left on this one kind of inlet, if you like, of a marina.
Okay.
And so anyway, that's all I said. I said, do we really need to get fuel? And so anyway, in we go. It wasn't pretty. I mean, anybody who's a boater will know the two most difficult parts of boating is leaving the dock and coming back to the dock, right? That's the hard part.
Right.
There's pillows and cushions going on the internet now that says, "I'm sorry for what I said while we were docking." You know what I mean? So it wasn't just us, right?
Oh my
Anyway,
gosh.
so to make a short story even longer is that the wind caught us. We got pushed up onto the dock.
Mhm.
The dock hand threw the lines to me too soon. Anyway, the boat started getting it looked like it was going to hit other boats, and I was up on
Mm.
the bow fending off, and it was a very difficult situation. And at one point, Gary puts his head out from the helm, and he kind of goes, "We're in trouble here," and I'm like, "Do you think?" So we got really, really. Anyway, we finally got out of that situation, right?
Yeah.
And when we were at the next port and we threw the anchor down, I was like, "Meh, meh, meh, meh." And I
Right.
I had stormed off But I got as far as the bow and there was nowhere else to go, right? I had
Oh
to turn. I had
no.
to turn. It's not like you're on land where you can suddenly jump in your car and go off to the gym or, go read a
Sure.
book or something. So I was like,
Sure.
oh, we got to sort of sort this out. I came back anyway, and I said, I th what did I say? Oh yeah, I was afraid that the boat was going to get, smashed up and cause damage to other boats. He was
Sure.
afraid I was going to get hurt,
Oh.
and then I sort of said, I told you we shouldn't have gone in there. And he looked at me and he said, no, you didn't. You asked me
Uh-oh.
if we really needed fuel. And
Oh.
that's when I realized, growing up in Ireland, we tend to, I don't know if people are still doing it, but we tended to speak in a roundabout way and not be
Hmm.
very specific. Like what I've learned of dealing with people in America who are born and raised here, most people have a more direct way of speaking,
Sure.
saying, I don't think we should go in there, right?
Yeah.
But that's not
Yeah.
what I said.
Mm.
And once we realized that, I realized that I had to be more direct, and he had to try and listen into what was I really saying. So we had to
Yeah.
come to an agreement on that. And what we did was we came to a place where we went, okay, we're still okay, we're good friends, I like you pretty much, but we still had some emotional charge to it, if you like.
Okay.
And we called that the first fix. So you know the way people say, okay, everybody can calm down. You know that it's not as brilliant as it used to be. It's
Okay.
okay, but it's still
Okay.
not perfect. And so
Hmm.
what we found was you leave a time, could be a couple of hours, it could be a day or two, and then when there's absolutely no emotional charge attached to the issue, you can then sit down and say, here's what I heard you say, here's how what you said landed on me, here's how I interpreted. This could have
Oh.
been a trigger from my past. This could have been nonsense, and we can really talk it through. And what we found was if you go through that whole process, the
Hmm.
same type of argument doesn't show up again.
Oh, really?
Yes. And if you don't address it, then it'll show up again in a different form, but it's the same ultimate argument. And I'm
Mm.
sure you've heard the things like, people load in the dishwasher differently. And then, it's like, oh, I should put it here, should put it. And then it's like,
Yeah.
well, you never liked my mother anyway. And it's like, where did that come from? Right. And,
Right.
if we don't iron out these things at the time, we store these up and they come
Hmm.
out at, that's what, it's one of the things people say when you're rowing, you should stay on topic while you're having a row.
Yeah.
Try not to drag up stuff from the past. If there is stuff in the past, then you've got to set that one aside and say, okay, well, now we need to obviously go back and deal with whatever that
Right.
triggered, and
Right.
especially, I don't know, I'm sure some of your listeners are in later relationships. They might have had a long relationship before or been married before.
Yeah.
Um, you're coming into it as much as you think you're coming in with no baggage, you still probably have triggers, little things that will remind you of previous experiences.
Hmm.
And I have found for me is that I might overreact in a situation that didn't warrant my reaction,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of bringing some issue from the past that was never actually sorted out, you know?
Hmm.
And it's
Right.
an amazing journey when you start to unlayer all of those things.
That's
But
so
that's
true.
what we did now in terms of living on the boat. And weirdly enough, when we came on land, we were on land during COVID,
Hmm.
and everybody was forced into that experience of living on top of each other.
Right.
Some of us had it easier than others. Some people were still trying to work from home. They were trying to homeschool. They were trying to, and they were maybe losing jobs. So it was a very different experience for everybody. It was like
Yes.
we were all in the same boat, but we had different sized boats,
That's
right?
such a great way to explain.
Some of us had the
So
mega yacht. Some
true.
of us had a little, sailboat that was like, something that you'd put a little duck in. So we all had a difficult time. Ours was the opposite. I mean, we were very blessed. We ended up in a house that was 2,000 square feet. And
Okay.
so our thing was we met in a tiny space. We had the
Yeah.
opposite. How are we going to cope living in this huge space?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Because
very
yeah, it
interesting.
was hilarious. Like the first 6 months, how many people filed for divorce?
Hmm. 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 And that's interesting because one of the things we learned on the water from boating was we'd
Hmm.
meet couples who saved all their life. Oh, and when we all retire, we're going to buy a boat, we're going to sail off into the sunset.
Sure.
And one thing we learned was it was nearly always more one person's dream than the other person's dream, and one person was
Oh,
kind of going along with it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the amount of people we met who tried it and 6 months later they were divorced was unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
And you know what's weird? We sat down one day. This shows you what you do on a boat all day. We sat down one day and we said, okay, here's a typical married couple. They
Mhm,
get up in the morning, one goes off, brushes their teeth, makes the food. Either both of them are leaving for the day, or maybe one of them is and one of them's at home. And then the end of the day, they come back and they make dinner and, maybe watch a bit of television, go to bed. And then the weekend, maybe
mhm,
somebody's playing golf, maybe somebody else is doing this.
mhm,
How much actual time do they spend in each other's company?
mm.
And of that time, how much of it is actually quality connected time? Where
So
you're,
true.
do you know what I mean?
I
And,
do. Yeah.
and so people would ask us, well, how long have you been together? And we would say, well, do you mean in human years or boat years? So just like a dog, you live on a boat with somebody 24/7, you get 7 years for every one human year.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely how you know that you were for one another that time
Mhm,
together.
mhm.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, Nia, I could talk to you forever. Your life is fascinating, inspiring, most definitely. Do you have any words for those of us women that we feel like we have it figured out, but are stumbling a bit? Any words of encouragement when we have those moments?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is to identify what you're passionate about.
Okay.
And when people, if people are stuck maybe on careers, like I said, I've changed careers 5 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Usually what I tell people is identify what you're most passionate about, and then ask yourself, is that something that you can earn money at? And if it
Mm,
is, you can take baby steps to, either get qualified or whatever it is you need to do, and then, start doing that.
okay.
If it's something that you can't make money at, then it's a hobby, which is fine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in terms of relationships and in terms of doing stuff, and travel and everything else like that, my new thing is never ever put off a dream, never put off a goal. And I'll tell you one, at the top of my bucket list, if you like, was Bora Bora in French Polynesia. And
Ooh,
I put it off for two reasons. It was always on the top of my list, but the two reasons I kept putting it off was number one, it's expensive.
sure.
It's and number two, it's the honeymoon capital of the world.
Oh,
And I was single.
okay.
So why would I go there as a single woman when everybody's either going to be, all lovey-dovey couples walking on hand in hand on the beach? That would feel
Right.
so uncomfortable, right?
Right.
And the other is it's too expensive because these overwater bungalows, I mean, it's absolutely idyllic. The aqua blue waters and the bungalows over the water and the green, oh, gorgeous, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
So during that year when I was traveling, I said I was down in the South Pacific and I just said, how often am I going to get a chance to be here? This is
Mhm.
something you really, really want to do. Just suck it up and figure it out.
Mhm.
Find a way. And what I ended up doing was I ended up spending 8 nights on Bora Bora for the price of one night in one of the resort hotels.
My
And
goodness.
here's how I did it. I found a lady on the main island who ran this little pension. She had this little studio room
Okay.
and they had food trucks that the locals would buy from. So I
Mhm.
bought all my food, stuck it in the little fridge, and then what I did was I picked one of the resorts. They have day passes, and I said I'd like to come for a day pass for lunch, and they said
Mhm.
absolutely, and we'll send the boat to the mainland to get you. So I had this amazing, like almost free boat
Oh,
ride around the lagoon to
yeah.
get to the thing, right? I get there and it was lunch was included. I was allowed to use all of their facilities, including kayaking. I went kayaking through all of the bungalows underneath all the area. I come back, I'm
Wow.
sitting on the beach for lunch, looking at this iconic vision.
Mhm.
And guess what? I had the entire place to myself. Do you know
Oh
why?
my gosh. Why is that?
I had been single so long, I forgot that people on honeymoon were actually back in their bungalows
Oh,
honeymooning, right?
so
It
that
was
totally worked out.
it was the biggest hit on the head to know, you know what, don't put off a dream and don't,
Yeah,
assume how things are going to be and stay living in the present when you are in the present,
yeah.
because to me, fear is something that you conjure in the future of something what might happen,
Mm,
and there's nothing to be fearful in this moment.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great reminder to, if we're thinking of it, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Never put off a dream. That's my new
Oh,
motto.
that's so wonderful. Well, Nia, for those that are super interested in learning more about you and reading about your journey, where can they find your book, Following Sunshine?
So the best way to get in contact with me is through the website, which is thewriteronthewater.com,
Okay.
which is just www.thewriteronthewater.com, and all my social media links are there, the Instagram and the Facebook, etc., all that, and X. But the book itself is called Following Sunshine: A Voyage Around the Mind, Around the World, Around the Heart. And
Wow.
guess what? You can imagine what the third part is, around the heart, when I finally meet Mr. Gary, or Captain
Oh,
Gary
yeah.
as I call him. Um, so the book is released on the 12th of September,
Okay.
and it's a memoir. So it is my story. But back to the conversation about Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
Yes, it's my story, but really what I've tried to do is make my story just a framework. If
Mm,
you imagine like a clothesline, and the clothes are the different chapters that everybody can take something away from for themselves. That's the
yeah.
idea behind it. It's not necessarily life lessons, but I think what I've tried to do is expose some of my story and show parts where it could be relatable, where somebody could say, okay, well, yeah, how can I apply that to me where I am now in my situation?
Oh,
That's
that's
the
perfect.
Yeah, that's the purpose of it, right? I didn't want to write a book about, oh, look at me, boop, boop, boop. Oh, this is all about me, right? No,
We've got enough stuff like that out.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's the framework is my story, but it's
Mhm.
more about the journey of where we are and where we want to get to.
Oh, I love it. Oh, Niamh McAnally, thank you so much. You've been an absolute joy. I know the Beauty's Aging Gracefully audience will love you and look forward to reading your book.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Oh, same. All right, everyone. Again, Nia's book is Following Sunshine. It will be out September 12th. And if you'd like to follow her, please look for her through all of her different social media sites. Again, Nia, thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.
All right. All right, everyone. Take care. Bye.